Hey, it's Brett, and this is Brett and Some Books. Or if you are on Facebook right now, you are watching Accountability Checks and Balances. Or if somebody shared this, then you're watching whoever they are. Anybody is free to share this. Everything I read is under that same contract. Um, ACAB includes the Peace Police. 3 reportbacks from Palestinian Solidarity Actions. Note, as with every mobilization, there are conflicting accounts of what happened from various personal and political vantage points. Yet the 3 excerpts below from recent reportbacks offer a much needed critique of tendencies, nonprofit ally complex politics, and peace police that repeatedly appear in moments of anarchic resistance so as to contain and limit transformative possibilities and thus ultimately uphold the status quo. The cover artwork is done by Zola. I really like that. Laid out by Black Flag Library and Distro. And Bay Area, a critique of obedient protest, anarchist actions for Intifada. At the November 5th, 2023 protest against the Friends of the IDF Gala in San Carlos, California, hundreds of people mobilized to shut down this fundraiser for a fascist, Zionist, genocidal army, but the key player preventing the actual disruption of this event was the nonprofit that organized the protest, Jewish Voices for Peace Bay Area, or JVP Bay Area. JVP Bay Area did the dirty work of the police and Israeli occupation forces through its aggressive peace policing, relentless harassment of anyone who wanted to do something more than stand and shout, and protest marshalling that helped the donors of settler colonialist genocide drive safely into the gala. It not only allowed for, but actually facilitated this fundraiser. Not only did JVP Bay Area aggressively prevent the crowd from doing anything other than standing and shouting, its yellow-vested protest marshals moved the crowd down the road, allowing the gala attendees to reach the event, and prevented the crowd from knowing where a blockade could be most effective for actually stopping the fundraiser. Whether directly or indirectly, JVP Bay Area collaborated with the cops and Zionists to help raise money for the IOF by ensuring the protest did not shut down the fundraiser. The protest marshals were stationed behind police lines next to where gala attendees were driving in with giant Israeli flags on their cars. Skyway Road is a dead end, a blockade several hundred feet up the street in the direction of Holly Street Viaduct would have actually prevented gala attendees from being able to enter, shutting the entire event down. Alternatively, or additionally, a blockade earlier in the day before the gala was being set up would have caused significant material disruption to the event. There were multiple strategies and tactics available for disrupting this gala. When asked why the crowd wasn't being invited or encouraged to block the entrance IOF donors were using, one of the white protest marshals stationed at the Fairfield Inn driveway literally said, "I'm just following orders." Whose orders were they following? Why was following orders more important to them than spreading the word to stop the Zionist cars that they could see driving right past them? It seems the organizers of this protest were instructing their security team to prevent protesters from stopping the gala. JVP Bay Area corralled the crowd into the area directly in front of the Hiller Aviation Museum, the gala venue, stationed security at the alternate attendee entrance at the Fairfield Inn, and actively worked with the police to ensure that genocide funders were able to attend the gala safely. This nonprofit cannot say it was unaware of what was happening when its protest marshals watched gala attendees drive into the event. It is clear that JVP Bay Area had no interest in actually stopping the gala from happening. Why not? JVP on the East Coast has done civil disobedience and direct action. This event was a fundraiser for the IOF by an organization that raised almost $90 million last year. If this was not a time and place where disruption was needed, when and where is? The actions of the protest marshals, although disobeyed by some, were unfortunately generally effective in decreasing conflictuality within the crowd and setting a tone of obedient and compliant protest. The most liberal elements of the crowd took this as a signal to deputize themselves as peace police and harass those trying to actually shut down the fundraiser. When participants of the demonstration attempted to take down the barricades separating the crowd from the gala's venue, the peace police filmed and took photos, physically interjected, and put the police barricades back together, and yelled at those attempting to push forward for stirring shit up. Why show up to a fundraiser for an army committing genocide if not to stir things up? The organizers' leading chants of "There is only one solution, intifada, revolution," showed themselves to be no more than counter-revolutionaries with zero desire to actually confront the cops and Zionists right in front of them. The co-optation of this revolutionary language is disrespectful to every Palestinian martyr who has fought for their life, land, and freedom. Where were the lessons of the anti-police rebellions of the past 14 years in the Bay Area, from Oscar Grant to George Floyd? Why were the organizers so quick to encourage obedience to the police? Have they forgotten the role of the police within the white supremacist capitalism, or are they just eager to capitalize on respectability politics by distancing themselves from the struggle for black liberation and revolutionary abolition? A JVP National Board member named Lisa Roffel told the News, "The nicest thing we could say is that it's in bad taste. When fascist Zionists are actively raising money to fund genocide, you want to say the nicest thing? You think it's in bad taste to give tens of millions of dollars to the IOF death machine?" To those of you who showed up and wanted to actually shut down this fundraiser for genocide, we have heard many of you express feelings of grief that protesting this gala did nothing. We agree. Nothing was done to stop the Palestinian genocide on Sunday. Our hearts are with you in this grief. We ask you to remember the rage you felt as you were forced to stand peacefully while funders of genocide drove by you in Teslas and the yellow vests blocked you from reaching them. Do not let this demoralize you. We ask you also to remember that no one and no organization has the right to tell you how to respond in the face of unspeakable evil. Just because they slap their logo on an announcement does not mean they are entitled to control you or any other protester. Now, Port of Tacoma, who even needs cops when? From Black Powder Press. The Tacoma, Washington port blockade on November 6, 2023 was a beautiful show of solidarity, but a complete failure. Who even needs cops when the peace police will do their job for them for free? At 5 a.m. in the cold and dark, hundreds of people wanting to blockade a shipment of weapons to Israel descended on the port of Tacoma. The way the port works is if the union declares the area is unsafe, it calls off operations for the whole shift. A big enough crowd blocking the entrances is usually enough, and yesterday it worked basically immediately. Success, right? The crowd grew and split into several pickets, marching in circles in different parts of the port, with organizers in yellow-green vests keeping people from stepping out of line. A group of riot cops was stationed inside the warehouse on the pier where the boat sat, waiting to try to stop protesters who might breach the fence and enter where boats are loaded. On the outside, the protest managers in yellow vests were constantly making sure nobody was planning to enter the pier. The atmosphere was generally festive and powerful, and people's anger at the ongoing genocide was apparent. People came to block the port and keep the boat from reaching its destination. Side goals were also making it cost them more and to create an easily reproducible action. It felt most like it was working great, but in the middle of the afternoon, the self declared leaders of the action made a confusing announcement. They told everyone the action was a success and everyone should go home. People were confused and deflated. Was the boat not still sitting there? Were they not still trying to block the boat from being loaded? It turns out that the military had sent in its own workers to load the boat, and the protest organizers had known about it for hours. Had people blocking the march known this, and uh, that marching in circles was for the publicity of the organizers and nothing more than photo op and symbolic show of resistance, things could have transpired quite differently. Organizers spread misinformation throughout the protest, and most people were convinced that marching in a circle and chanting was actively stopping the ship from being loaded or having shipments delivered. In reality, the military already had the shipment in the dock and successfully loaded all 28 containers. Out of fear of police dispersal, people were greatly discouraged and directed not to breach the chain link fence that separated them from the ship. At the end of the day, organizers called the action over and sent everyone home despite the ship still being in the dock. People came to the action to block the boat. People were there to prevent the flow of arms to Israel. People were there to stand up for Gaza and put their own bodies on the line to take action to attack the war machine. But the peace police took away the people's agency. They did whatever they could to take away autonomy from anyone other than the Big O organizers. They sabotaged the action to present a false narrative of success when in fact they had actively prevented it. How the fuck was that a victory? The people of Gaza need the bombs to stop dropping, for the arms destined for Israel to be stopped. In trying to seem respectable, we are shooting ourselves in the foot and nothing more. ACAB indisputably includes the peace police. Do what you can to stop the genocide now. If you're not willing to take action yourself, step out of the fucking way. And for the third one, we go to Australia, The Boat That Wasn't Blocked, by Backlash Blogs. There is a genocide in Palestine. We need to block the boats to stop and disrupt Zim ships as a means to attack and undermine the Israeli killing machine. Right now, our efforts are being misdirected by organizations that adopt the rhetoric of direct action, smear it over events that are not that, and undermine movements that truly have the will to act against Zionism. A November 11, 2023 rally in Melbourne, Australia, titled Block the Boat, was organized in a way that did not reflect any intention of actually blocking boats, but instead actively frustrated attempts to do so. Some disruption of a road took place in spite of the organizers through attendees defying and ignoring their instructions. Despite working to inhibit both the road blockade and direct action in general, organizers basked in credit on social media for the action that happened in Melbourne, also significantly exaggerating its size and impact. People have a courage and capacity to act that overflows the bounds of symbolic demonstrations outside the empty halls of power. The words block the boat imply, well, blocking boats, and that was how many people interpreted it. Yet less prominent lettering on the promotional materials indicated that the purpose was actually to say, block the boats and call for a boycott, a message addressed to Zim. It wasn't clear why we had to go through the port to do this. The call to gather at an event to boycott Zim is bizarre. How can the general public boycott a company that doesn't sell final goods? The meaningful boycott in this case is not a boycott, it's a strike, the withholding of labor. I attended a meeting for trade unionists for Palestine, where some people tried to call for exactly that. The cognitive dissonance was off the charts. There was much talk of war fees refusing to load ships for South African apartheid. What a glorious past! But when people suggested that the same resistance should happen now, that workers and unions should refuse to build or transport weapons destined for Israel, organizers responded aggressively and dismissively. The conversation was derailed into discussion of bringing more flags to rallies, issuing statements, and general BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions, things like SodaStream or McDonald's. While BDS is good, giving up McDonald's is not the same as blocking the flow of weapons to Israel. And while statements are nice, it's not words or lack thereof that kill people, it's bombs. In this context, the hypocrisy of the Block the Boat rallies in both Melbourne and soon after Sydney is jaw-dropping. To hold an event calling for someone else to boycott Zim and the Israeli arms trade, while you and your organizations are continuing to load and unload Zim ships, build and handle arms, and otherwise enable the supply of chain of weapons for Israel. The timing of the rallies also seemed suspiciously rigid and convenient. If the goal was to intercept a Zim ship as it arrived in port, it seemed strange this could be scheduled several days in advance for the Melbourne event and a week for Sydney. That's not how the sea works. It seemed odd as well that the mighty ocean would conspire via time and tide to bring a boat to port at ideal rally hours, 12 p.m. on a Saturday and 5:30 p.m. on a working day, respectively. The locations weren't conducive to disruption. The Sydney rally was planned for a recreational boat ramp some distance away from any container ship or cargo. The Melbourne event took place at a point which is 7 to 8 kilometers away from where Zim ships are typically scheduled to dock. It was hard to verify claims made by organizers that we were there to meet a Zim ship because no one specified which ship we were supposed to be meeting. This would be understandable if we were conducting a clandestine action relying on the element of surprise, but we were not. The time and place were splashed all over social media and flyers. In Melbourne, few trucks came through bearing Zim-branded containers, evoking what a comrade who was present describes as jeers from the crowd and the collective middle finger. At some point, these jeers escalated into action, and people blocked the road to stop one such truck from coming through. Some lay down in front of it, others sat down. Eventually, the truck was redirected to another entrance, facilitated by a police escort. People still wouldn't leave, and within hours there was a whole line of trucks backed up. Estimates I've heard range from 50 to 60 to hundreds. It was not the organizers who made this happen. People on Twitter posted in real time to say they tried to get us to leave, and the crowd are having none of it. One comrade who was present describes organizers yelling at people to move, actually attempting to grab one or two people, and being quite physically intimidating, though by their account it was more words and shouting than physical force. In the days that followed, there was a huge inflation on social media and then actual media of what had just happened. To be clear, we did not block the port. We blocked one road leading to the port, causing diversion of traffic. That is not nothing, but it is very different from blocking the boats. This did not stop the same organizations that had tried to prevent the blockade from happening, and failed to support it when it did, from accepting the exaggerated credit. While some information can be found to clarify, none of this has come from the organizers themselves, Trade Unionists for Palestine. Judging by the online presence of affiliated individuals, you would think this group and its orbiters had always applauded direct action in general, the Melbourne action in particular, and even that they were the progenitors of the blockade that tried to shut it down. I don't need to draw any conclusions about people's motivations, and I won't. What is clear is that people are telling the public stuff that isn't true, harvesting their contact details, and getting them to turn out to events on the basis that they can block the boats to stop weapons from going to Israel, when these organizers are actually making sure it is impossible to block any Zim boat at these rallies. There are ideological differences in analysis around the value of direct action. If you don't like or believe in it, don't do it. But get out of the way. Stop misleading people. Stop, frankly, lying. I don't know what else to call it when people appropriate direct action rhetoric, bask in the credit for actions they didn't undertake, and tried to stop and tell untruths that demobilize or even render future actions impossible. And so that is the end of those three report backs. This is one more report back from Minneapolis, I believe, St. Paul. And this is really important because I reference, it's called The Clash of Communities, the State of the Occupation at the 4th Precinct. And I think it's important because I talk about community a lot. A lot of the materials that I consume and probably you consume also heavily rely or refer to community. So this is a good examination of what community is and isn't, and how that very powerful word relates to us and how we act. Quote, a man who has a language consequently possesses the world expressed and implied by that language. Frantz Fanon. Okay, let's take a look at this mess. Quote, together as a community, we are going through something no community wants to face together. It's the dignity of neighborliness, the dignity of community. It's the dignity of the city of Minneapolis. It is that strength that will carry us through as a community. My vision is that we catalyze this moment for peace, that we strengthen the bonds of our communities with police and with each other. Mayor Hodges. Quote, all different types of people from the community are protesting, from a comment on Twitter. Quote, earlier on Friday, Minnesota Governor Mark Dayton met with Minneapolis Mayor Betsy Hodges, NAACP leaders, the Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety, and other officials to discuss measures such as community policing, from an article on The Guardian. Quote, community has been up all night, from the Black Lives Matter's Twitter. Quote, tension between black community, Minneapolis police resurface after fatal shooting. Quote, a title of an article in the Star Tribune. Quote, Augsburg College and its students are a part of the Minneapolis community and have been affected by the homicide of Jamar Clark, lack of police accountability, and structural racism and targeting and harming communities of color, to quote Augsburg ADSG. And, quote, it seems to me y'all don't want help from the white community, to quote a comment from Twitter. Wait, what? I'm sorry, but communities inside of what community? The Minneapolis community, the black community, the North Side community, the white community. Is community a place, an attribute, or something else? Regardless of our own confusion at the occupation, the city and police are certainly already know. On the Inside MPD website, there is a section called Community. Under that heading are the subheadings Crime Prevention, Investigative Crime Mapping, City and Precinct Crime Statistics, Police and Procedures Manual, and Chaplains and Chiefs Council. Community for the city is first of all an activity, not a static group of people. But what is that activity? Clearly, lawful self-management, or, in other words, self-policing. Community is an operation laden with moral overtones to attempt to cause policing as an activity to proliferate. And, as anyone at the 4th Precinct on Friday could see, it must be working quite well, since two groups nearly came to fists over the idea, a tame one, that someone might burn the American flag. We need to drop the idea that the police are merely here to repress us. They repress us like the shepherd represses sheep. Sure, he blocks their potential movement with fences and guard dogs, but he encourages them to move and intermingle within the prescribed area. This injunction to, quote, live, but live the right way, end quote, is reflected in the petitions directed at police to, quote, see how peaceful we were being, end quote, when we were being maced, or in the Augsburg ADSG's recent demand to, quote, provide community oversight of the police with full disciplinary power, end quote, and to, quote, require that officers live in the communities in which they serve, end quote. Community here is an extrajudicial term, a super-policing term used to transform the abstract law into a moral category. This is the community of priests, the priests of order that creates its blessed ones and its pariahs every time someone tells a 16-year-old that he's, quote, hurting the movement, end quote, when he throws a bottle. A lot of the confusion on the ground is a result of wanting to think community is either a place or as the hypostatized version of an attribute. If it's the first, that means that without anything happening, we could enter or exit the community like a building or a park, which would be meaningless. If it's the second, that means that regardless of what that group is doing, it forms a community, so that if, for example, all the poor and disenfranchised Irish immigrants in the 19th century New York City were put in isolation chambers and kept from interacting, their merely being Irish would still make them a community. But there's really no reason to resort to philosophical abstractions. Let's say they all worked full-time in increasingly micromanaged and diversified factories and lived in single-family apartment units. Would they still form a working-class Irish community? Unfortunately, I think the police are ahead of us on this question. They know that community has no substance outside of the relations and connections between people. The word itself comes from the Latin communitatum, meaning fellowship of relations or feelings. Relations or feelings, these are what is held in common with in a time of action. There is no community that just is, and that is finally coming out to demonstrate as if it's out of its own cave. There is only community happening or being built, as Unicorn Riot said in one of their Twitter posts. In the end, there is no community except as a meaningless abstraction. Let us drop this confusing term. Our tie to it is moral and not strategic. It transforms the dynamic relations between words and bodies into a mass of static bodies and statements removed from context. There are only communities, in the plural, flowing in and out of each other, forming conscious and subconscious bonds, exchanging words and telling stories, building fires and barricades, blocking police and policing others, throwing rocks and snitch jacketing. There are the communities of friends and accomplices that blend in and out of each other seamlessly, and there are the communities of police doing the same. The strategic intelligence already exists outside the 4th Precinct, but it exists paradoxically side by side with the moral language of a church of radicalism that breaks the essential bonds being built in our actions. This logic of sadness is the logic of pictures and theory, or the logic of death and dead things. So yes, community and communities continue to be built at the occupied 4th Precinct. The absurdity of the claim that police from our own community should police us becomes more obvious day after day as we see the confusion around community come to a head. Let's be clear, there are no police outside of the policing communities. We not only don't need the police, this is obvious. Our own leaders are the ones responsible for personally reproducing it as a moral necessity at the occupation. Down with the horrible monster. Community. Long live the communities. In the world, quote, in the world through which I travel, I am endlessly creating myself. End quote, Frantz Fanon. And this was written by, signed by a pariah of the community. So, I thought that that is an important piece to read because just like accountability is a very loaded word. It has a lot of different definitions. Accountability can sound punitive, or it can sound like it's based in respect and honesty. So, respect and honesty are accountability, and being accountable to communities means understanding what the communities are, who is defining the communities. There are people doing an LGB movement and omitting the T, transgender, or any of the other categories that fit under the umbrella of LGBTQ plus, and as somebody who's not straight, I'm a member of both of those communities in theory. However, I don't want to be part of the LGBT community because that's a community built on exclusion. So I don't answer to that community. That community doesn't speak for me. And so my accountability and my belief in accountability is that that community needs to get their heads out of their asses and support one another, because none of the work that we do can be done individually. And not that they need to be useful to be part of it, but trans people have been instrumental to liberation, for women's liberation, queer liberation, and a lot of other liberation movements, because as you can see from intersectionality, some people never get a chance to sit down and relax. They're always under attack. Trans black women have a very dangerous world to live in, and that's why we need to push back and build something better than the carceral system and the police that will lock a poor woman up to get sexually assaulted, and the Prison Rape Elimination Act, I think, is what was just evaporated from the law or something. That can't be our principles. The community of America needs to have better conditions for every single person who's here. But that's community is a powerful word, and peace police speak on behalf of the community, in theory at least. And so we do need to understand who is being served by what, and don't be afraid to criticize that, because you don't have to answer to the person that put their name on a flyer. I went to a protest yesterday and there was jack shit happening. Um, and it's a common spot for protests. Um, and I didn't know, I thought like, well, maybe I should just start spray painting some shit. Didn't do that. I would never. Um, but I was like, oh, well, I don't know. Uh, I don't know where I was going with that. I'm hungry. I'm rambling. Uh, so yeah, that is that. Thank you. If you want to check out more like this, I have a playlist on YouTube called Zines and Pamphlets, and I've got all different types of concepts um, that might be interesting or informative for you. So please check them out. Have a good day.